Hello and welcome to Atlas Pulse TV. Today in the studio, it's a great pleasure to have Alan Vey and Annika Monari. Both of them are entrepreneurs who have recently done a successful initial coin offering in the blockchain space. Their company, Aventus, aims to take over the world ticket market, and as you'll soon find out, it's an enormous place to be with very, very significant potential. Welcome you both.
Thank you.
Now, before we dig into Aventus and what your achievements are, Alan, you've come from Imperial College. You both met there?
Yeah,
and,
we did.
And you were studying artificial intelligence?
Yeah, I was doing my master's in artificial intelligence, but then my thesis was done with Professor William Nottenbelt, Director of the Cryptocurrency Research and Engineering Center. And that's how we sort of started down this path, looking at blockchain for, well, that was initially film rights distribution, but that's how we kind of moved on to eventually Annika and I ended up in about April 2016 founding Aventus and starting down the blockchain for ticketing.
And Annika, you were also at Imperial College studying particle physics.
Yes, exactly.
What is that?
I did my thesis in artificial intelligence-based particle detection. Bit of a mouthful, but how subatomic particles interact with each other. That's what particle physics is.
Right. The most important point here is, there's a real genius out there called Jamie Dimon, and he says everyone involved in blockchain, digital assets is stupid. So what would Professor William Nottenbelt, the head of cryptocurrencies at Imperial College London, the finest science establishment in the world, where my father went, what would he think?
I think he might have a thing or two to say about that. Yeah, it's not. It's an interesting way of classifying the space. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, so certainly the people I talk to, I haven't come across that much stupidity. But he did have a point, and the point is a vast amount of speculation in Bitcoin and so on. Yeah. And I would say that, back in 1998, 1999, Amazon shares, which today have 20% volatility, back then they had 100% volatility, which is the same as Bitcoin today. Yeah. This is just .com 3.0, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just an very early stage market, and you see the same kind of signs. Some people are talking about a bubble, whether it's a bubble or not. I mean, the .com bubble resulted in the internet as we have today, which is obviously something very important. And I think we'll see the same kind of thing with sort of blockchains and cryptocurrencies. We'll have to get the sort of regulatory landscape right, but then it has the same potential to be just as big a thing as the internet was back in the day.
Alan, please use the phrase digital assets, not cryptocurrencies. It's what leads to all the confusion.
Digital assets.
Assets go up in price, currencies go down in price. Okay. It's as simple as that. Okay, so tell me about your company, because Jamie Dimon says that there's nothing useful about this space, but I believe your application, what you've discovered, is extremely useful.
We would hope so. We're trying to build a protocol on the Ethereum blockchain that allows event organizers to control the entire ticketing lifecycle for their events. And so what we try and do is create almost a standard for ticket exchange. So the event organizer can effectively eliminate black markets and therefore in the process control secondary markets. So they can set inflation caps, and they can derive revenue from secondary market sales, and they can control the entire distribution of revenue after the event. And the real core idea is by building a protocol or a standard of exchange, we can now open up the ticket selling process to various new sales channels that weren't able to do this before because of the siloed nature of the ticketing industry. So now, for example, social influencers or forums or blogs, etc., can start selling tickets.
So what we've got here is the ability for different organizations to communicate together.
Yeah.
And so a traditional database is on its own, it sits in an organization, everyone guards it and protects it.
Yeah.
Now we've got databases that we are happy to share. And so in the ticketing industry, it's a series of networks, and you can engage and embrace other networks. And that's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, the real way I like to sort of describe it is we have, if you think of a traditional database, what the blockchain is you have that same sort of database component, but it's immutable. You can see the full historic record and no one can change that. And the idea of what the Aventus protocol is on top of that is we sort of give people the tools through which they can define the rules, how they want to interact with each other in the ticketing space. So they can say, I only want tickets to resell for 10% above face value, or anything you can sort of imagine across the ticketing life cycle. And once those rules have been agreed upon and everybody sort of deploys and agrees on their smart contracts, as it's called, then everybody has to sort of adhere to those rules, and the blockchain governs it. And that's really what we got. We got a blockchain with a governance mechanism on top, and in our case, specifically applied to the film industry. But these various other, ticketing industry, but these various other ICOs that you see, or token sales that you see, they're doing the same things in other verticals.
Sure. I like that expression, verticals.
Yes.
You said it to me earlier, there was another word, vertical something.
Narrow vertical is how we like to think about it.
Can you explain, please, what a narrow vertical is?
Yeah, sure. So for the longest time, until recently, I would say most of the blockchain projects were mainly infrastructures, new blockchains or things that sit one layer above the blockchain. But now as the space matures, what you're seeing is people going into narrow verticals such as ticketing or film rights or different particular industries, and starting to apply the blockchain to them. And what the implications of that are, for example, in our token sale, we had a ton of new people come into the space, people who've never heard of crypto before, but heard of what we were doing and why the blockchain seemed important and decided to come and join us. And so the space is expanding exponentially because of this kind of vertical integration into these particular industries.
And the ticketing market doesn't just stop at events. I mean, that's where you're starting. I mean, you've got a much grander vision for it, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. So we're starting in sort of music and sports events, but then there's a whole market. I mean, I mentioned film before, where there's all the theatrical sales, so any sort of cinema or actual theatre sales. That's the biggest primary market for ticket sales. There's just not much of a secondary market component, which is why we're starting in sort of music and sports. But then much wider reaching, there's travel, if you think of sort of trains or transportation, even aviation, where they already associate identities with tickets, and they do many of the procedures we've implemented to increase the security for normal ticketing.
And let me stop you there, because airline travel, people think of passports and security and identification.
Yeah.
Now, what you're saying is that a ticket on the Aventus system has identity as part of it, and actually is highly secure when it comes to identity.
Yeah, it's very secure. So we use all of the sort of top cryptographic principles that you see that sort of make the blockchain possible. We use the same high standards to keep anybody's personal information secure. But the real idea here is now you're not necessarily showing up with your passport. That's a sort of extreme case for security. But maybe you can show up. Annika and I both have a background in artificial intelligence. So maybe you can show up and you just sort of present your face, and it uses face recognition, like what you see with Apple's most recent iPhone X, where you sort of log in with your face. Or there's options around voice or various other sort of biometrics, or even something as simple as you swipe your credit card. That's something Ticketmaster has tried before. So there's various sort of degrees of identification that we associate with tickets, depending on how secure the event organizer wants to be with their thing in particular. And this gets quite useful when you look at the sort of landscape here in the UK, at least. We've had some trouble with terrorism at some of these events, so you could run the identities through a terrorist watch list before sort of letting anybody into the event, or afterwards you would at least have some kind of idea who was there if you chose to use Aventus in that way.
That's incredible, isn't it? Because you have an event, there's some sort of incident, and if the organizer wanted such information, they could have a roll call at that point in time. I mean, that's progress to me. So to get this business off the ground, you need loads of capital, and you've successfully raised all this money in Ethereum. Very, very well done. Congratulations. You make it look easy. How was it easy to raise $20 million in 7 minutes?
It was very difficult. It was 4 months of constant attention to the social channels, constant marketing efforts, and at the same time working on the product and trying to get releases out for the community to see our progress in a limited amount of time. Quite a few sleepless nights, I would say.
So what have people bought? They bought an Aventus token.
Yeah, it's the right to participate in the Aventus ticketing network, if you will. So the token has 3 main uses. Number one, it's for deposits for event creation. So event organizers will have to put in a deposit to stop people from spamming up the network. We don't want people putting 1 million events in 1 minute and, network overload. The second thing is voting on network parameters and identifying fraud in the network. So people can vote on whether they think an event is fraudulent, or a ticket seller is fraudulent, or a sales channel is fraudulent, and that helps mitigate some of the existing problems in the industry. The third and final use case for the token is the anonymous resale process we have in the secondary market to combat touting. So the example I usually like to give is, let's say in the system, the event organizer says, I don't want anyone selling tickets for above 10% of face value. what I could do is book the transaction in the system at 10% above face value, but then we could be in a pub and you could give me extra money on top of that. The only way to prevent that is if we anonymize resale. So if I never know who I'm selling to, we can't ever agree off-chain on different extra transactions. And to facilitate this process, we need the token in something similar to proof of stake.
Sure. So, I mean, I understand it's a very compelling thing. I can see where the artificial intelligence kicks into all of this sort of thing. It's obviously high and mighty. But the point is, to the user, they won't even notice there's blockchain in the background.
That's, yeah.
And it's just a clever system that organises the world in a more efficient manner than it currently does today.
Exactly. That's one of our sort of core goals around this, to make sure that it's as slick and easy for businesses to integrate, and that the user at the end, they don't even have to care about blockchain if they don't want to. It's more of an infrastructure tool in the context we're using it in than anything else.
So you raised $20 million in Ethereum. Obviously, the market's taken a knock because China's banned Bitcoin for the 128th time, I believe. And so, you know, maybe they haven't banned it, who knows. But anyway, that's gone down. That must put a bit of a warning signal that actually you need to diversify your funds, because you've got 25 people to pay. And if Ethereum goes down, that's not so much fun. So what do you intend to do about that?
So we've got, this is the interesting thing in the sort of token sale blockchain space that we find ourselves in. We've now got this pool of Ether that we need to manage, the 60,000 Ether that we raised, but then we've also got our own token AVT, again, which is sort of free trading on exchanges, and we have to sort of manage the value of that. So for the sort of foreign, we think of it as like foreign exchange risk, the Ether itself, but obviously a very volatile market. As you were saying, it's even more volatile than Bitcoin is. So we're looking at various options around either there are tokens now on the blockchains that sort of are backed by fiat currencies. So you can look at Tether, or there's, I think, USD and Euro trading pairs coming as sort of ERC20 tokens. That's what the formal specification is on the Ethereum
so
network.
So clear English to the viewers, that means that you can swap your Ethereum to euros or dollars or whatever.
Exactly, but all within the blockchain.
System.
Exactly. So you stay on chain, everybody can see your money is still there, and they can see when and how you're spending it, at least to a certain degree, but you can avoid the sort of high risk that you have in the very volatile crypto assets, and rather have it backed by fiat currency.
But Annika, why don't you just go and buy a Ferrari with all this money you've raised?
You know, we can't do that, unfortunately.
I think you'd look good at a Ferrari.
But, thanks. But no, it's interesting because technically the funds raised and the remaining tokens are held by the Aventus Protocol Foundation. And the Protocol Foundation's responsibility is to look after the AVT stakeholders, so those who contributed in the sale, and to look after the protocol and the ecosystem as a whole. So we will, as Aventus Systems, the company, will be developing a lot of the protocol for the first couple of years. We will be employed by the foundation effectively, but not all of those raised funds will only go to Aventus Systems. They'll also go to other people adding value to the Aventus ecosystem as a whole.
So, I mean, the point here is that you're building a real business, you've got lots of people coming in, and it's a 24/7 world, this blockchain, and it never allows you to sleep, so whatever your holiday of choice is, you can't have it. And you have to have these people all around the world, because I imagine could be even coders like daylight from time to time. Is that right?
No, definitely.
So how are you going to build this? I mean, what's the vision?
I mean, initially, sort of where we've come from with this for the ICO and the token sale, we had people sort of set up in America, we had people here in Europe, and then we had guys in China as well, to make sure that we're sort of live 24 hours a day. And for the marketing and the communication side, that's very important, because as a lot of people know, there's a lot of scams and a lot of sort of fake messages being sent around in the community. So you need to sort of react quite quickly to those. So yeah, sort of building out that on the communication front. And then developers, it's easy enough to work remote. A lot of people, even sort of you see with the Ethereum Foundation, a lot of people do work remotely. But what we're going to try and do is set up our headquarters here in London and get as many of the people sort of on the ground as possible. And then of course, Annika and I, we sort of have a 24-hour, whenever it needs us, we're there kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've got a lot of work to do over the next few years. Yeah. But there is a clear vision for this space, isn't there? I mean, you've got this something vertical. What was it called again?
Narrow vertical. There we go.
Come on, narrow vertical. Everyone, we should know what that means. So, we've got this narrow vertical. And what are the projects that you admire when you look around digital assets, broadly speaking?
Yeah, there are so many. I mean, I'm sure you know this, but there are 10 or 20 or 30 new token sales a week. One project I particularly like is District OX. So they're building different marketplaces, a protocol for marketplaces such as freelance work or what have you on the blockchain. They're making it really easy for someone to build a marketplace like that and grow their marketplace using token incentives. And I think their token sale was in July, but it's a really good project and I have my eyes on it.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much happening, isn't it? I remember, again, going back to the analog of, .com 1.0, the internet, was fabulous and we kind of knew it was going somewhere, but no one knew where it was going. No one predicted correctly that it would end up with the likes of Facebook and so on, which didn't even exist back then. Google didn't exist. None of it existed, frankly.
Yeah.
And here it is today. So, people criticize the space as a solution looking for a problem. But I think just as the internet didn't work in the 1990s when the hype was so big, the same will happen here. I mean, it just strikes me as very comparable in so many ways. But you're proper coders, both of you, highly intelligent people, and you've looked at Satoshi Nakamoto's Bitcoin code.
Yep.
And what do you think of it? Do you think it was genuinely could be written by one person?
I think it's unlikely that all of the code was written by one person. I think that the sort of technical formal paper that was written, the sort of peer-to-peer system that was described in that white paper was probably, that's very doable by one person, but building out the intricacy of all of the details around the Bitcoin network, it must have been a large team. Nowadays we know there are a lot of people working on it, but back when it was first sort of released, I would have to say that there must be at least a few people who reviewed it, if not participated, whilst it was being developed.
And do you think Professor William Nottenbelt is Satoshi Nakamoto?
That would be a funny thing to tell him. I haven't done that yet. I don't know who it is. I thought it was the Australian guy from a while back, but...
Okay, so we're not quite sure if Satoshi is a man or a group or a woman, probably a woman, or even a beast. But what about Jamie Dimon? Do you think that's a real person or a fictitious character or a group of people?
Given the recent comments, it's got to be a fictitious character.
It can't really exist.
It can't be true, can it? It can't be true.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching Atlas Pulse. Don't forget you can sign up to Atlas Pulse on atlaspulse.com, and it's free, and it's a very, very interesting read whenever I get round to writing it. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.